Hey guys, Adam here with AmericanMuscle.com, and today we're taking a closer look at installing and dyno testing the Roush Performance Power Pack Level 1, available for the 18 and newer Mustang GT. Now, if you're the owner of an S550 5.0, you might be in the market for not only a new cold air intake, but maybe a tune to go with it, but you're not looking to break the bank on something insanely expensive like a Power Pack Level 2 or 3. This is going to be one of your entry-level power packs to really increase your horsepower and torque, give you a better breathing engine, better throttle response and acceleration, and a number of other increases for your either 6-speed or your 10-speed auto. Now, we've got a 10-speed auto strapped down to the dyno here. A customer came in. I'm going to show you guys the results. We, of course, established a baseline run first in 7th gear, 1-to-1 gear ratio, then did the exact same thing under the same conditions in 7th with our tune and intake installed. So before we jump into the details, let's take a look at the dyno graph. Now, of course, we ran it with 93 octane in the tank, both before and after. And for our baseline number, here's what we made. 413 horsepower and about 386 foot-pounds of torque at the rear wheels. We then, of course, flashed it using our Roush voucher with our new cold air intake installed, 93 in the tank under the same conditions in 7th gear, walked away with 428 horsepower and 391 foot-pounds of torque at the rear wheels. That's good for peak gains of 16 horsepower and 5 torque. Those numbers alone are pretty good, but curve is where things get pretty impressive. Now, curve gains, we're seeing really good peak curve gains at about 3,500 RPMs, maybe a little under there. Curve gains of 16 horsepower, 25 pound-feet of torque at the rear wheels. So those are just about on par with what Roush claims. Now, Roush typically claims somewhere between 24 horsepower, 19 torque. We're seeing something like the opposite happened here. And that rear wheel torque at the low end is something you're definitely going to feel on a daily basis. But we are seeing pretty good gains all across the RPM band, especially at the top end as well. So overall, I'm pretty happy. All right, now back here under the hood, I want to show you guys more about this cold air intake. Now, the Roush Power Pack Level 1 is going to include the Roush cold air intake and the Roush voucher tune. So what this is going to do is replace your factory intake with a larger MAF housing, and it's also going to be giving you a washable dry filter. The dry filter is going to filter out all the unwanted particles coming into the engine bay that you don't want getting in there, while also giving you a nice reusable one. When it comes time for routine maintenance, you can pop it out, clean it, and throw it right back in without having to oil it. It also comes with a brand new heat shield or air box. This one's got a more extended lid, which I think looks a lot more aggressive under the hood, but it's also got this clear see-through window. It can give you a nice view right into the condition of your filter. So I think also that adds to the appearance under hood, but it's also a lot more functional, so you don't have to uninstall anything to see how your filter is holding up. Now, the tubing itself, ABS plastic, all using CAD data, so it's a perfect fit, and it's going to reuse all of your factory ports. You are deleting your sound tube, so that's something to keep in mind, which isn't too big of a deal. They give you a plug to make sure it's properly deleted. Now, this entire kit is going to come in right around $1,000, and it's also going to be 2 out of 3 wrenches on our difficulty meter. Now, as you can see, our factory engine cover did have to be trimmed to make way for this heat shield. Now, if you don't want to do any cutting, you can have the option to not use the factory engine cover. That's obviously up to you. We decided to go with the cutting. Our customer wanted to take care of that, so we have that done for him. Now, 2 out of 3 wrenches means that it is going to require a few extra tools that a simple cold air intake doesn't normally require. What that means is I use the body saw for this, so you want to have a cutting tool of your choice. You're also going to want to have a full socket set on deck, a couple of ratchets and extensions. I'm going to use an impact gun as well. So when it comes to actually installing your tune, you're going to receive a Roush voucher included in the kit. You'll need a laptop and a diagnostic tool like a J2534. We're using the Dashbridge CX tool. That is essentially an OBD2 tool that goes into a USB for your laptop. And I'll show you guys a little bit of that tuning process coming up in just a little bit. All right, guys, tools used in this install include an impact gun, a variety of extensions, including a very long one, 1/4-inch ratchet, 7 and 8 millimeter deep sockets, 10 millimeter deep socket, and a 10 millimeter deep swivel socket, 15 millimeter deep socket, T20 Torx bit, pliers, and a panel removal tool. Recommended tools include a body saw, a magnet, scissors, super glue or Gorilla Glue, painter's tape, and a diagnostic tool such as the Dashbridge CX J2534 tool. All right, now because our 2018 GT here has that strut tower brace, we do have to remove that in order to get to our engine cover, to remove that, to then do our cold air intake. Now, before we get to that, we actually have to remove our battery cover. So we're really just removing layers to gain access to the intake tubing. So to get this off, there's a couple of twist pins that you just twist off by hand and pull straight back. About 3 of them there holding the battery cover in place. once you have those off, take the battery cover and just set it aside. Next up, we have to remove the two 15mm nuts holding on both sides of that strut tower brace. Now you'll notice that it goes under the positive terminal harness on the battery, and it also has that brown retainer clip, which really, you're just kind of wiggle back and forth and pull straight up on, and then rotate out of the way. Grab a 15 deep socket and remove those two nuts. Same thing on the other side. Now getting this off, it can be a little tight under this positive terminal harness. You're gonna lift up and carefully get this over that stud. If you find you need to, you can disconnect the terminal itself and remove that harness too. Now on the engine cover, there's two 10mm nuts holding them on right under these two caps. Grab a flathead screwdriver and just pry that cap off on both sides. Grab an extension and a ratchet as well as a 10mm deep socket. Go down there and loosen up those 10mm nuts. Now it can be really tricky to get the nut out, but once you have them loosen up, we'll be able to remove this all in one piece. So you're just gonna lift straight up, pop them out of their clips, and set the whole thing aside. Now to remove your factory intake, what you're gonna do is loosen up the 7mm clamp holding the tubing to the throttle body. Then remove all of your tubings, as well as your MAF harness, and then unbolt your airbox. So we'll start here at the throttle body using a 7mm socket. If you don't have one, you can use a flathead screwdriver. Gently loosen that up there. All right, now to remove your tubings, your vacuum lines, you're just gonna push to release these clips and pull back. On this tubing, it's a little bit different. You're just gonna pull back on the gray locking tab, which you'll see here. It's really just pulling back here to release it and pulling straight back. Now for your sound tube, you're gonna need a pair of pliers to pinch this hose clamp and pull off. But before we grab that, let's do our MAF sensor. The MAF sensor, there's a red locking tab on the bottom. You're just gonna pull straight back on that, pinch and disconnect. All right, for the sound tube, pliers, pinch and close that gap there and pull straight back. All right, now you can grab a 10mm socket and extension and remove the one bolt holding on the airbox. All right, now with everything disconnected, we're gonna pull back on our tubing to get it off the throttle body. Lift up on the entire assembly to remove it all in one piece, including that air duct going into your front grille. Now you can see the MAF harness has a clip right here. You're just gonna pull back on to disconnect. Set this aside. All right, now we are gonna have to remove our sound tube. This is your factory sound tube, which basically lets you hear some of that intake noise inside the engine bay. Our Roush Performance Pack actually has us deleting this. It gives you a plug to plug the hole that leads all the way back to the firewall. So what you're going to do is have to remove this. It's a retainer clip right here on your strut tower. It's as simple as using a panel tool or something similar to just pry up on this to get that to remove just like that. Now this, again, leads all the way back to your firewall right behind the engine. Now you're gonna have to pull straight back to unplug it and then grab the plug in the kit to plug up that hole. Now it's gonna be really tough to see, but we're gonna go all the way back there and pull it out of its housing. So that's unplugged. Now there is one single 10mm bolt holding this on, so you're gonna need a couple of extensions and maybe a swivel socket to get that off. So like I said, it's really difficult to see, so you weren't able to get this on camera just for you guys on video, but what I'm gonna show you guys is what I used. I used an extremely long extension, a 10mm deep swivel, and I loosened up the 10mm nut all the way to the end of the stud just so it wouldn't fall off. I used a long magnet to pop it off and pull it out safely without dropping it in the engine bay. Now, you might need a variety of extensions. You might need to do some kind of Frankenstein tool and get a couple extensions and a couple swivels, or try out what works for you. And then if you have small enough hands, you can just reach down there, but I unfortunately wasn't able to magnetate today. Once you get that 10 mil out, you're just gonna pull back on this sound tube and feed it out of place. Now that the uninstall is out of the way, we're just gonna plug that sound tube while we're here and we have extra room. So grab the plug, include it in the kit, feed your hand all the way back there if you can, and plug that somehow. Now you might need an extension to push on it to really get it sticking, but what we're gonna do is just feed our hand back, set it into place. This is much easier than getting that 10 mil out. All right, you just wanna make sure the lip all the way around is seated properly and it's not falling out, then you're good to go. So right at the end of my extension here, I'm kind of tapping on that grommet we just installed to plug that hole just to give you guys a reference to where it is. So we finally got that factory air intake off of our 2018 GT behind me. It's on the table next to our Roush PowerPack Level 1 intake. Now, some of the similarities and differences I want to go through, mainly those big differences, and there are a bunch. Now, this new intake system focusing on the filter uses a 360-degree conical design with a dry filter material. The factory paper element filter is also a dry, but it's not made of those cotton gauze materials and it doesn't have a double wire mesh outer layer to help keep shape. Now this particular one, again being a dry filter, does not require oiling every time it comes time for routine maintenance, and you don't have to pick up a new one because it is washable. Just some pressurized air will do the trick, clean out all that dirt and debris, and you're good to throw it right back in like it's new. This is going to filter out down to 2 microns in size when it comes to those particles and debris and all that stuff you don't want getting in. So much better job as far as filtration, and it's also going to allow more cold air to make its way in, especially thanks to its 360 design. Now the rest of the tubing here is made from an injection molded automotive grade plastic material. The new one is a lot shorter than your factory, but it's also got a textured black finish, which I think looks a little better under the hood, gives it some more character. It's impact resistant, UV resistant, so if you're at car shows with the hood popped, it's not fading over time. And it's also got this silicone coupler similar to your factory one, just a little smaller and a lot stiffer to help streamline some of that airflow and prevent any air leaks. Now, your heat shield here is made from, again, that same automotive grade plastic, all using CAD data. It was designed to be an absolute perfect fit. What I do particularly like about this, even though it is not a 100% closed air box like some of the ones that would have a lid, it is going to use weather stripping that we'll install in just a bit to seal in underneath that hood. What that means is it's blocking out extra engine bay heat and keeping that cold air locked in. It's also got a factory style air duct that'll make its way down to your front upper grille to pull in as much cold air from the front end as possible. It's taking a page out of the factory intakes book, which I do really like. Not everybody reuses that same kind of design. It's just gonna help that much more pull in that cold air. Now, all this said, I want to assemble all this on the table. We do have to transfer over something from our factory intake, and that's gonna be your MAF sensor. So we're gonna grab the appropriate Torx bit, grab that off, swap it over to our new tubing. Grab a T20 Torx bit and a ratchet, and you're going to remove the 2 T20 screws holding on that factory sensor. All right, carefully take that out and set your factory components aside. All right, so we're gonna take our factory MAF sensor and insert it into our tubing. Now there's a MAF tubing adapter included in the kit, which adapts the size of this tubing to a different diameter. Now we're gonna remove that because it'll open that up a little bit more. So this is the 98mm adapter. If you wanna open it up and have a larger MAF housing, you can do so now, which I'd recommend if you wanna get the most air coming in. So what we're gonna do is install this using those factory Torx screws. Grab your T20 and tighten them down. You just want to be mindful not to strip them out because this is a plastic housing. Definitely don't use an impact gun. All right, once that's nice and tight, we can move on. Now there are 2 other things we have to remove from our factory air box. This rubber grommet, which pulls straight back. And if your rubber grommet is not located on the bottom of your heat shield, it may be tucked on the inside of your engine bay on the outside of that wheel well. Now we're gonna take that and put that down for a moment. You're also gonna remove this metal spacer and grommet from the side. That's where your factory 10mm bolt was. So that'll come out. The grommet is seated in place, so you may need to push from one end and pull from the other, just like that. Now we can set this back aside. So you're gonna take that grommet again and insert that into the knob on the bottom of your heat shield, just like that. This little extra elbow on the side is where this metal spacer and grommet are gonna go. Seat that grommet down there first, making sure the grommet sits all the way in, and then take that metal spacer and insert that as well. With that taken care of, we can insert our air duct onto the opening on the side. Now, it really only goes in one way, so just line up that little puzzle piece there and snap it into place. Now we can insert this into our engine bay. All right, so now we can drop this into place. Just make sure your MAF harness is out of the way and you're lining everything up properly. You wanna make sure that the grommet and your factory 10mm bolt are lined up properly as well. Grab that factory bolt and set it into place. Next, take that MAF housing and you're gonna insert this from the inside of that heat shield through the hole to line up these two open holes to the threaded ones on the heat shield. So grab your MAF, insert that upward so it slides through, and then rotate it so the MAF is facing the front of the vehicle and those line up. Grab the 10mm bolts included in the kit and insert them into those threaded holes, thread them in by hand, and then tighten her down. All right, so now we can install our filter. Now you'll notice on the front it says Roush and has an arrow pointing down. Just make sure that arrow is facing down when you install the filter, and have your clamp installed on there as well. All right, so once you have your filter in place, grab your clamp and insert that properly. It may need to be loosened up in order to fit. Grab an 8mm socket or a flathead and tighten it down. Now for this, we're going to use our tubing and a 7mm socket to tighten them down to the appropriate sides. So this little bellowed section is going to go to your tubing and the opposite end is going to go to your throttle body. There you go. Once you have it seated all the way, rotate your clamps upward and tighten them down with a 7 or with a flathead. All right, next up we can just reconnect our hoses. This will go to the fitting already pre-installed on the tubing, and the other one from the valve is going to go to the inner fitting. Finally, we can route our MAF harness. As you can see, it goes right across the top here, so I'm actually going to feed this underneath to make it look a little cleaner, and then connect it to our MAF sensor. Push down the red locking tab, and you're good to move on. All right, next up, take that cover for your heat shield, and you're going to insert it under this lip on the frame so that it lines up with the cover hole. Now, you're going to use the self-tapping T27 Torx screws included in the kit to tighten them down to those holes. I'm just going to insert these one by one to get them started, just by hand, a couple of threads so they hold themselves in. Grab our T27 and tighten them down. Now, because we're going into plastic, if you are using an impact gun, guys, have it on its lowest setting and take your time. You don't want to gun it on too quickly and strip these guys out. Just take your time and get it done properly. All right, so the last step here is to really put things back, but there is one caveat. When you're putting your engine cover back on, you'll notice that the heat shield now extends too far. So if you want to retain your factory engine cover, you are going to have to cut off this corner. There's a template included in the kit. You can print that guy out. If you didn't get it in the box, hold it up, tape it on, make your cuts appropriately, and you'll be able to reuse that engine cover. So I'm going to show you guys what that looks like and how to do that process here. So Let's get this on the table, get our template set up, and we'll get to cutting. All right guys, now when it comes time to cutting the engine cover, if you are choosing to retain that, what you might want to do is focus on your prep work. The prep work is going to make your life a lot easier in the long run and make the finished job a lot cleaner looking. So print out that template, include it in the kit or include it in the instructions. We pulled ours offline. You're going to cut out the template itself and cut out that hole in the middle. As you know, there's that open hole that retains the engine cover with that 10mm nut. If you remember back to the uninstall, cut out that hole just so you can make sure you're lining that template up to exactly where you want it to be. Once you have that taken care of, tape it down and make sure you like what it looks like. Make sure it lines up properly, make sure it's the proper size. If you have to rescale it on the computer, you can do so. Ours is looking good. Now what I like to do is fold it back after I have it taped in position and painter's tape underneath of it. What this is basically going to do is make it look a little bit neater as far as the burring is concerned. We're going to use a body saw for this. You want to make sure you're using the appropriate blade for this kind of material since it is more of an ABS plastic. We don't want to use a full-blown Sawzall or anything like that. Body saw will do the trick the best. Now it's up to you however you want to do this or whatever tool you want to use, but this is what I'd recommend. So once you have the painter's tape laid down, bring that template back into place, taping it down again. What we're going to do is grab a Sharpie and just draw a line right over that painter's tape. All right, now take a look at it and clean up any of the messiness if you see any. Make sure the line is straight and even. All right, so it's looking good. At this point, we can remove that template. But you want to keep the painter's tape on. We're going to cut through the painter's tape. Now on the back side, I've already taken care of this, but it is worth noting. There's more of this padding or heat shield, whatever you want to call it, that's laid down like this. You want to peel that off. Cutting through this is just going to burn up. You don't want that to happen. Remove this. We can reinstall it later. We might even be able to cut through it as well. So let's reinstall that later on. We'll worry about that when we're done. But for now, flip her back over, grab your body saw or whatever cutting tool you're using and get to work. Now make sure you're using glasses because safety glasses do come in handy here. Whenever you're cutting or grinding or any of that, be protected, be smart. Now for that foam insulation on the underside here, as you can see, we obviously have to cut this, so that's what we're gonna do. Just line it up here and make our cut. Might be a little trial and error here. All we need to do is just snip off this edge. Now how you reinstall this is up to you. We did have to rip it off of the original glue points, but grab some super glue, you can hit that right back in. Just hold that, let it dry up, let it sit, and then we can reinstall it. All right, so now that you have this cut, you can reinstall this into place. You can see it now clears the intake. Snap it into place over those studs by just putting pressure all around it. Grab those factory 10mm and insert them into those holes. Now it's difficult to get them in there, so what I like to do is just insert the nut into a 10mm on a socket as well as an extension and feed it down there gently, just tighten it down by hand. Now you can grab your ratchet or impact and tighten her down. Put your caps back in place. All right, now strut tower brace. Feed that over, feed it underneath of the positive harness and back onto your stud. and drop it into place on the driver's side and replace your 15mm nuts. On this side, you can just pop that retainer pin back down. Last step here is throw your battery cover back in place and reuse those little hand screw clips. With that all taken care of, it's time to get to tuning. All right, so when it comes time to actually tuning your vehicle using the Roush voucher included in the kit, all you're gonna need is an OBD2 dongle that'll connect to your OBD2 port and to your laptop. You're gonna need a laptop. You need something that you can have in the vehicle plugged into the OBD2 for the duration of the tuning period. This is something that you'll need an internet connection for. You'll need to download the Roush Diagnostic Tools software, which the link to that is on the back of the voucher. You can download that, and you'll really just follow the directions. There's about 11 steps to get this done, and really most of it is taken care of on the program itself. Now, what you'll do is open up that program, connect it to the vehicle, make sure the key is on, and you're gonna follow the instructions to enter the voucher code at the bottom, which is unique to yours, as well as the voucher family, which is again unique to the one that you have in the kit. Once that's taken care of, you'll need your tear tag information if it's not able to pull it from the OBD2. So what that means is you'll need your computer code. It's a 4-digit alphanumeric code, so KLA3, something like that. Now obviously it's different for every vehicle. Every single vehicle has its own. They're all unique, so you wanna make sure you're getting that. Now, if you don't know what it is, if you have a handheld tuner, you can plug it in and read it off the tuner. You can also go under the engine bay and you'll find a sticker somewhere along the engine bay, either on the ECU or tucked under some of the modules, so you can look that up. There's specific locations for your generation. Now, we've already taken care of that. All of that information is loaded onto our software. We have tuning right now. So once you have all that information, you'll really just hit flash and it'll do its thing. Now, as of right now, we're on our 7-minute mark, so really 10 to 15 minutes is typically the range of time that this takes. If your battery voltage is lower than 12 volts, hook it up to a battery charger. You don't want to do this under 12 volts. So in the S550, you luckily have a gauge on the screen you can navigate to check your voltage. If it's low, charge the battery. It's definitely worth it. You may get error messages. You can go as far as bricking the ECU if there really isn't enough to connect to this. So a couple of things to keep in mind. If you don't have a module, you can pick one up at an auto parts store. If you really don't want to do this yourself, you can take your vehicle to Ford and they can flash it for you. They have the proper tools. So obviously, there's a lot of different ways you can go about this. So we're almost done. Progress bar is almost at the end. We'll come back when we're finished and check out those results. And once you're done, you'll hear the noise coming out of the speakers in the car. It'll say flash complete. You may now disconnect from vehicle and you're good to go. Well guys, that's gonna wrap up my review, install, and dyno test for the Roush Power Pack Level 1 for the 18 and newer Mustang GT. If you wanna pick up the Level 1 Power Pack from Roush, you can do so right here at AmericanMuscle.com.